Long ago, there was a kingdom run by Theorists. They lived in peace for a long time. Then, the animatronics attacked. They took over the channel, infecting every theory they touched. Every good franchise was killed off one by one. Only one franchise remained, a newcomer called Andy's Apple Farm, and it knew what it had to do. Hello Internet, welcome to Game Theory, where today I need you to be very quiet, cause I'm hunting wabbits. Rabbit Nights, to be exact. Recently, a new indie platformer game was released, Rabbit Nights, and despite what the name might tell you, no, it's not another installment in the never-ending parade of Shovel Knight sequels. But that doesn't mean that Rabbit Night isn't a sequel. It is. Kinda. You see, back in November of 2021, developer M36 Games released an adorable little adventure called Andy's Apple Farm. In it, you play as the titular Andy the Apple, who must compete in minigames against his friends in order to receive a super secret special prize.
Oh wow, what's the prize? It's the key to your house. You took the key?
Nothing says raising the stakes quite like getting the keys to your house stolen. That said, all the minigames are pretty easy. Sorting some fruit, playing some Friday Night Funkin', playing I Spy, so I should be on the fast track to getting those keys back. Except, that's not exactly what happens. Beat the minigames and your reward is getting locked inside of a barn to play tag against a mysterious new character, Peter the Pumpkin. The game glitches out and suddenly we're treated to disturbing imagery of Andy's face melting and a whole lot of faded photographs of kids with their eyeballs blocked out. Yep, we're not on the Atari anymore, Toto. This is one of those games. We're talking about real life horror, and the ending we just saw is one of many. By replaying the game and tackling the minigames in different orders, purposely losing those games and just generally throwing your body against every wall you can find, you start to unlock the real story of this thing. The story of a family and the mysterious black goo that's been chasing them down for decades. As we pieced together in our last theory, the real story here is that of the Eastwoods. Thomas, a struggling game developer, his wife Cameron, and his two children Isabella and Lewis. One night in October of 1982, because let's face it, all the scariest things in video games have to happen in the early 80s, Lewis and Isabella take a boat out onto the lake near their family home. Two kids leave, only one returns. Isabella pushes Lewis into the lake, where he then drowns. In the wake of Lewis's death, their father Thomas begins to drink heavily and obsess over his work. The goal? To make his latest game, Andy's Apple Farm, as lifelike as possible. And if you've ever caught a whiff of an indie horror game in the past decade, I think you could probably guess where this one might be headed. Fed up with Thomas's erratic and drunken behavior, Cameron kicks him out. Worried about the family in his absence, Thomas asks his close friend Arthur to keep an eye on them. But clearly something got lost in translation, because the next thing we see is Arthur's Christmas stocking hanging up on the fireplace next to the rest of the family's. Not for long though, as the house mysteriously burns down with Cameron inside. An angry Thomas accuses Arthur of killing his wife, at which point he chases down and kills Arthur in the woods while Isabella watches from a distance. Gotta love those indie horror games and their happy endings, right? Except there's one last character that we haven't mentioned, a mysterious black entity that appears to be following the family. First in the boat with Isabella, then later possessing Thomas to kill his friend, then later killing Thomas himself. But of course, since this is an indie horror game where one of the characters is a game designer, you know that means that no one is ever truly dead. Instead, they're inside of Thomas's game, Andy's Apple Farm, where each character represents one member of the dead family, all back together again, asking us to free them from their digital prison. Also, the entity's in there too, in the form of Peter the Pumpkin doing everything he can to stop Andy from escaping. At least that was our theory on what was going on, and for the most part, pretty much everything was confirmed right by the game's Christmas-themed DLC. So, cool. A really exciting Apple game and all, but what does any of this have to do with rabbits again? Specifically the new game Rabbit Night? Well, since last December, the world's been patiently waiting for Chapter 2 of Andy's to release. In fact, it's so anticipated that YouTubers like the Game Salmon are now eating an apple every single day until it comes out. Gotta love the commitment to the bit. Wonder if he's had any medical issues since he started doing this. You know what they say, apple a day keeps the doctor away and all that. Wonder if it's true. Do I smell a food theory crossover? Anyway, here we all are just waiting when all of a sudden M36 Games quietly begins to release something completely different. This other new game called Rabbit Night. I don't know about this. Feels sus. Over the following months, more screenshots would be dropped and soundtracks would be uploaded to the M36 Games YouTube channel. Just building hype for the new game, or there's something else going on here? Considering how much I loved Andy's, I figured it was at least worth checking out. I listened to that first soundtrack release called Danger Approaches, and at first it just seemed like any old 8-bit soundtrack, till you get to the end. That, my friends, is no ordinary audio. That is a spectrogram, basically a way of hiding images and frequencies of audio files. By putting this particular track through a spectrogram, you end up with this image, the one and only Thomas Eastwood. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a sequel. And now that the full game's out, we know for sure. This game isn't just a cutesy platformer about a rabbit fighting for the return of his kingdom. It's a game full of glitches and codes that connects us right back into the story of Andes, giving us new characters and new events in the timeline. So, you're ready to bob for some theories? If so, open wide and take a bite out of this. In Rabbit Night, you play as Rory the Rabbit, the last surviving rabbit in a kingdom that's been infested by evil mushrooms. You platform your way through one short level, fighting these mushrooms, avoiding bottomless pits, you know, classic platforming stuff. At the end of the road, you encounter a boss, another rabbit that's been infected by the mushroom invaders. Beat it, and bam, you've won? In true M36 fashion, we're met with an error screen. There is clearly more hidden inside this thing, but in order to find it, we're gonna have to break this game apart. Already, off the bat, the plot of the game sent up some huge red flags. A rabbit who's the last surviving member of his kingdom sounds a lot like Isabella, the last surviving member of the Eastwoods. Everyone else dies from a mushroom infestation sounds remarkably similar to everyone dying from a dark, evil entity infestation. But to truly know for sure, we need to access these glitches. So of course, the first thing I did was throw myself at every possible wall and bounce on every possible mushroom to see if there were any gaps in the collision detection. I'm not bad at games, I'm just looking for lore. I swear, every death's intentional. And you know what? Me concussing my little lapine friend paid off. By bouncing on the top of this specific mushroom, you end up above the ceiling textures, which causes the game to play a television news report about the Christmas Eve house fire that ultimately killed Cameron.
A 13-year-old girl was the only person found at the scene after waving down a family in their car for help. Police arrived on the scene shortly after.
And if you walk through this wall in stage 1, we see Isabella sitting on a bench outside of an office. We're given this audio recording of a police officer interviewing her about the event.
If we're going to solve this case, well, we'll need your help.
The cameras.
The cameras?
Yeah. Me and Mama used to set up cameras in the forest.
Was the house in view of the cameras?
No, I don't think so.
Then why are you telling me this?
Find them. They'll show you.
Show us what? Isabella, show us what?
Clearly, she's implying that these cameras will show them Thomas murdering Arthur out in the woods, the exact event that we just witnessed. So, true to my hunch, it does seem like this new game's gonna be focused around Isabella's story, giving us details about what happened to her after the events that we saw in Andy's apple farm. This is also supported by the game's title screen. When you boot it up, we see the copyright for Eastwood Games 1986. The last time we saw the company was in Andy's apple farm. That game was released in 1983, the same year that Thomas died. So it seems like the business was able to carry on after his death. And sure enough, that's exactly what we see. In stage 2, there's a hanging ledge. If you jump through the wall, you end up setting off a ton of glitches, including the reveal of a letter written by a new character named Jeff. I'm telling you guys, all this blunt force trauma to my rabbit, totally worth it. Anyway, the letter reads as follows.
Dear Susan and my daughter Summer, as you know, after my brother's death, we took in his daughter, Isabella, as our own. I know she may seem quiet and reserved, but you should try and open up to her. I know she may seem a little odd, but I think Isabella and Summer could become great sisters. Try talking to her a bit more, okay? She's been through a lot. She could use a little bit of support from you two. Love, Jeffrey.
Notice that Jeff says his brother's death. This new character is then Jeff Eastwood, Isabella's uncle. And suddenly the title screen makes a lot more sense. He's the one continuing the family business. That's how Rabbit Night was able to release in 1986 when everyone we knew at Eastwood Games was presumably dead in 1983. So, okay, now we know Isabella's been taken in by her uncle Jeff, but it seems like he may have gotten a bit more than he bargained for. By falling into this specific pit, which might seem like an arbitrary pit, but the clue here is that it's a tough pit to die in considering there's 2 layers of crumble blocks protecting you, we get this death screen. It's game over. Not for Rabbit Night, for Jeff. He dies August 22nd, 1986, shortly after taking in Isabella. No good deed goes unpunished, right? But listen. You hear that? It's more audio code. By shoving that into a spectrogram, we get this, a distorted face, which is nightmare-inducing on its own, but there's also some text.
I just wanted a safer life for her. It wasn't just Isabella I took in. Something else came with her.
But you don't have to take Jeff's word for it. The entity tells us this exact thing. You see, after you get an out-of-bounds secret, the game drops you into a black void full of assets from Rabbit Night. Except one of those things doesn't quite belong. The oddly sinister gourd, Peter the Pumpkin. He glitches out and chases you across the map in a massive, creepy eyes, lose the race, and you get this, a wall of numbers, which the dedicated theorists amongst you might recognize as hexadecimal code, though some of the ones near the top are a little tricky to decipher. I mean, yellow on yellow? Come on, man. Anyway, at the expense of my eyesight, I did manage to decipher it and got the following message.
Jeff, you did this to yourself. You should not have tried to interfere. You took her in, thus me in. She should not be trusted, just like her father.
Looks like the adoption was a 2-for-1 deal. You get the cute little girl, and her demonic blob friend comes along for free. What a steal! Apparently, it goes where Isabella goes, and wasn't just satisfied at only killing one branch of the family tree. But what is this thing? And more importantly, what is its goal? Just killing off struggling game designers? Well, if you do manage to outrun Peter during that final chase, you can keep running, getting closer and closer to a sprite character that looks a lot like Isabella, only to be cut down by a mysterious black tentacle at the last second.
So very naive, Jeff. You cannot save her. She is mine to control. All you have done is drag yourself into a hell you cannot escape from.
The entity seems to feed on grief, maybe because it makes people easier to manipulate and control. Thomas was devastated when Lewis died, so that gave the entity an entry point to control Thomas. Then, after everything that happened in Andy's apple farm, Isabella is now in a similar situation. She's grieving. She's lost every member of her family, and so the entity is able to latch onto her and slowly take control. Now where have I seen this one before? Oh yeah, it's just like we see with the final boss of Rabbit Knight. A member of the Rabbit Kingdom has been corrupted by an evil force, and when someone tries to save him, they fail. Jeff is Rory the Rabbit Knight, and Isabella is the final boss, a being that's been corrupted by an evil force. But again, for what? Going back to the Christmas DLC for Andy's, there's one scene that shows us that the entity is what's dragging people into the game world. It's also something that we see happen in Rabbit Knight. Remember that obituary picture of Jeff and the spectrogram code that we saw from earlier? Well, after everything fades away, we see a brief glimpse of a pixelated sunflower. We see that same sunflower digitized into a scene from Andy's apple farm after the "she's mine to control" ending. And we know that this has to be Jeff because in a flash, the words "thank you for playing" become "thank you for playing in my world, Jeff." If you manage to beat the first 2 stages of Rabbit Knight without dying, instead of a boss battle, you're treated to a new scene where we play as Isabella. You walk through the hallways of a new house, presumably Jeff's house, until you reach the main room, where you find Jeff lying on the floor in a puddle of blood, a trail leading out the window. The entity has brought yet another person into the game, yet another victim. Maybe it's trying to nab a bunch of people to make the first ever Atari-era MMORPG. That would need a lot of NPCs, you know? Although something doesn't quite add up. Thomas was aware of what he was doing in Andy's apple farm. After killing Arthur, he looks at his hands and proclaims, "What have I done?" But here, Isabella asks, why does this keep happening? She isn't aware of killing anyone, and the trail of blood leading out to the window, along with no blood being on Isabella, tells us that this wasn't her doing. Either the entity hasn't yet got full control of her yet, or someone else is doing the entity's bidding. So where does all of this leave chapter 2? Well, we know that eventually Isabella is gonna wind up in the game. The first chapter in its DLC heavily implied that she's Melody the Moon Girl, but we still have no idea how she's gonna get there. We do know that by the end of Rabbit Knight, Isabella is most likely homeless again, having killed off or at least been partially responsible for her uncle's death. Enter the mysterious character Bailey the Bee, who is teased heavily at the end of the last game and since then has been introduced to us via an unlisted video on YouTube. Here we see a new character named Sam picking up Andy's and melting into the game, being told that she'll be reunited with her again soon. It seems to me that the story of a lost and homeless Isabella having a run-in with a former friend of her own age is the most logical next step here. From there, the two will join forces in an effort to solve the tragedies that keep happening around Isabella, and the chapter ends with Isabella getting sucked into the game, the final Eastwood inside of the cartridge. Like the unlisted video said, you'll be with her again soon, as Sam is in the process of entering the game, which means that Isabella is presumably already in there. Or, you know, maybe there'll never be a chapter 2 to Andy's apple farm, and instead the story will keep getting told through odd 8-bit spin-offs like Rabbit Knight. If that's the case, well, the game Salmon better get ready to eat a lot of apples. But hey, while we're all waiting to go to the fun fair that's expected for chapter 2, you don't have to wait around to get tickets to some real-world events thanks to today's sponsor, SeatGeek. Last few years have been kind of quiet on the live events front out for, pretty obvious reasons. But hey, concerts, sports, and theaters are all back in full swing now. And I don't know about you, but I'm determined to go to it all. Lucky for me, SeatGeek literally has everything I could possibly go to in one place. So I'm getting the best tickets for anything I could want to see in the same convenient location. And it makes me confident about the price I'm paying. SeatGeek has a simple color system that tells you at a glance if the seats you're paying for are below, at, or above normal pricing. Green seats mean that you're getting a great deal, just like watching shows on a green-themed channel. No offense, Film Theory. All joking aside, though, I recently used SeatGeek to buy some hockey tickets to see the North Carolina Hurricanes with Steph for a date night. Go Canes! But she actually had to drop out because of some work stuff. So instead, I got to take my other best buddy, Ollie. It was his first game ever, which was pretty darn awesome. I later made it up to Steph with tickets to go see Moulin Rouge the musical, also available on SeatGeek. Like I said, I'm trying to fill my evenings with a lot of variety. So fill your evenings up with some entertainment too. If you download the app using the link in the description below and use the code GAMETHEORY, that's GAMETHEORY, all one word, then you can get $20 off your first set of tickets. That is $20 off whatever you want to go see. That is huge savings, which means that your tickets are getting even better value. Those green seats just got a whole lot greener. So once again, go down to the description, download the app, use the code GAMETHEORY, and save $20 off your first purchase. Go to some experiences that you're never gonna forget. And as always, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.